Hello and welcome to today's episode. My name is Melissa Robbins. I have a special guest here. So I have Renae Fieck, who is an occupational therapist, a breathwork facilitator, and a feminine leadership coach. Now, Renae helps women unlock the power of their cycles so that they can achieve their wildest dreams by aligning with their feminine energy and their strengths. She's also an author of the book Cycle Sync Your Business: How to Leverage Your Menstrual Cycle for more income and impact in your business. Thank you so much for joining me here today, Renae.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Now, this is very exciting. I did mention to you before that I've started doing more reading about this, and every time I hear more about this, I'm fascinated by how it can work and how it can help women in the way that they run their business, the way that they feel about what they're doing, and hopefully sort of remove some of that worry and stress about, getting things done in certain timeframes too.
Yeah, it makes such a huge difference. And yeah.
Absolutely. And can you tell me a little about your background, your expertise? How did you dive into this area?
Yeah. So probably about 8 years ago, I was working at the Children's Hospital as an occupational therapist. And I just found out that I was pregnant with my third baby, and then found out my husband had a brain tumor all in the same month. And so we spent that next year, it was like crazy, spending that next year, like navigating ER visits, surgery, hospital, seizures, like all the thing in the midst of bringing a new baby into the family. And really just got hit home with this idea of, I don't want to be going away to work every single day when my kids were babies and they're little and they grow up so fast and we're never guaranteed tomorrow. So I felt like so much of my life in that season was just focused on like one day when they're back in school, or one day when this happens, or one day when things get easier. And I was always just focused so much on the one day in the future. And I realized like we're never guaranteed that day. And so if I want to enjoy my life, like I want to know that if something happened tomorrow, I gave it my all, I enjoyed it today. And so I started in my own business. At the time, it was network marketing, like went all in. Years into that, realized like I was trading the very things that I was trying to get. So working a 9 to 5 plus building this side hustle, I was staying up late, working in the morning, squeezing in every little crack and cranny of time anywhere I could possibly do it, and wasn't hitting the goals that I really had set for myself. And I was getting close to that place of burnout. Reached out to my mentor and said, I don't know what else to do. Like, I need to hit these goals. Like, this is where I'm at. Like, this is what I'm doing. And she was like, business is just a numbers game. So if you're not hitting the numbers that you want, you just need to do more. And I was like, there's no more to give. Like, I have nothing left, like there's no part of me. There's no other time. I can't do this. So I started trying to figure out like how to become more effective. I did like time management, blocking, batching, read all the habit books. Like maybe it was my willpower, maybe it's consistency. Yeah, everything I could possibly do. And still was like feeling like something wasn't working. Like I wasn't getting there. Like I was like, why? It must be something wrong with me. Like maybe there's something magical that all these other entrepreneurs have that I just don't have. And that's why it's working for them and not for me. And in that process, discovered how men and women are different and how our brains function differently. And so how we work is different and how we experience time is different. And so I kind of went down this rabbit hole of diving into that. And it really was like such a game changer and a gateway that when I started sharing it with the clients that I had at the time, they were like, oh my gosh, this is what we need to know more of. So really kind of shifted my business and really went all in that space.
So can you tell us a little, what is cycle syncing? Have I said that right? What does cycle syncing actually mean?
Yeah. So really it's kind of looking at like how your body runs in a cycle with your hormones and your menstrual cycle, and how we match up the things that you do in your life to meet where your body's at. So your brain and your hormones change literally everything about your body. So how your brain thinks, how it creates, how much energy you have, how much focus you have, everything. And it kind of takes looking at like, can we zone in on that and figure out like where your body's naturally at, and then match up your life with it. And really we could match anything in your life, like what you eat, how you sleep, how you exercise, like how you work, literally everything can, because you are the one, it's like your operating system, right? Your hormones are the operating system that's operating in the background, impacting how you show up and how well you show up. So when we know what that operating system is functioning at, like what the capacity is at, that's how we can adjust what we're doing so that we're meeting those demands instead of just constantly forcing ourselves to work in opposition of it, or then burning out or feeling frustrated or getting overwhelmed or any of those types of things.
And I think that's where I was just going to say to you, like, about forcing it. Like, that is where
Mm.
you do feel that, like, why is this not working for me? Because, as you say, like, you're
Yeah.
forcing against where you're naturally at that stage. And so it's never going to be as effective if you are, trying to do the things at the wrong time, I guess. And so what are
Hmm.
like is there 3 to 4 stages? Like, what are the different stages that we go through?
Yeah. So men have testosterone and it functions in a 24-hour rhythm. So they start really high in the morning and then waxes and wanes as the day goes on. And then they go to bed. They wake up the next morning with a fresh dose. Women, we have not testosterone, we have estrogen and progesterone. And so how they fluctuate throughout the month kind of makes 4 distinct phases. So the front half of the month, your first phase is your menstrual phase. That's when all of your hormones are the lowest. So you're going to feel the most energetically drained. Like you're not going to feel like physically you're losing a lot of blood too, right? So the blood loss is going to make you feel like you're losing iron and things, and you're just going to have less energy. So it's a really great time to focus in on like how you actually recharge yourself. What is it that your body needs? Like, how do you pull back and kind of rest? Can be a really great time for setting goals and mapping out your vision, mapping out your plan for that next coming month, like really getting yourself solid and grounded before that next phase, which is your follicular phase, which is when your estrogen starts to climb. And when that estrogen kicks in, it kind of feels like testosterone, if we could feel it, like if we could feel like the same as testosterone, but that like big momentum, like let's get things going, let's get things moving, let's get big projects going. Like there's a lot of times where I'm like full of fire and you feel like confident and ready. You're like, I got this great vision. I've got this great idea. I've got this great thing. I'm going to run with it and execute it and like just get it out there. And so that's your estrogen taking over. I call it the accelerate phase for my clients because it's like, let's accelerate, like let's get things running. And then you
Yeah.
reach the top of that estrogen curve. And that's right around the time your body's ovulating. So you're naturally the most magnetic, you're the most radiant, you're the most attractive, you communicate the most effectively, you're going to like social hours, happy hours, like those types of things. You're going to feel so much more relatable, like you're going to want to be around other people. And then
So
as
that's a good time
that
to
estrogen,
So I was just
go
going to say
ahead.
that's a good time to like batch
Yeah,
content and create things too. Like, if you're actually
totally.
showing up and
Yes.
being there, and if you can run it in that way, that's definitely one of the activities I would suggest to be in that stage as well. Sorry, interrupted. Continue
100%.
on.
Oh, you're totally fine. Yeah. So like if you're recording social media content, this is probably, or like batching YouTube content or whatever, like this is the phase where you're going to record it and you're going to be like, man, that was good. Like that was so good. And I only had to do a one take. Like I didn't have to record it 5 bajillion times. Versus the next phase is when we get into when progesterone kicks in. And progesterone feels very different. Progesterone, if you try to record a video when you're on progesterone high, you're going to feel like, man, do I really look like I have those bags under my eyes? Like, do I really feel like I look awful in this video and I stumbled over my words and like that sucked? Like, why did I do that? So it's like totally, totally different. But progesterone is definitely much more moody. It's much more like introverted. Whereas estrogen, it's like extroverted, put yourself out in the world, create big things, get big movement. Progesterone's like, can we just come back and like curl up in a ball, take care of ourselves, like be with ourselves? And so it can be very productive. Like if you're writing any sort of copy, whether it's on sales pages or, social media captions or any of that type of stuff, it can get really juicy content in there because you're feeling really emotional. And so you're going to write with a little bit more emotion in there and like connection. Also is really great for like organization and detail oriented stuff and all of those types of tasks. So can be very productive. It just can feel like a snowball of emotion and overwhelm and frustration. Like a lot of women get really hung up on this phase because they feel that those feels so deeply. And they're like, why am I getting so angry about the kids leaving the socks on the floor when a week ago I felt totally fine? And now I'm like a raging lunatic and I feel like the world's worst parent. I'm the world's worst business owner. Like everything's crumbling. I'm just going to burn it all to the ground. Like
Yeah. And
if
it's
you
amazing
start paying
how,
attention.
yeah, that's the thing. If you're
Yeah,
not paying
go.
attention, it's amazing how long you'll have your menstrual cycle for, and still you just forget that that is where you're at. Like if you're not actually tracking or not actually syncing, you sort of just
Yes.
forget, and then you tip into the next stage. You're like, oh, that's what that was, and it all sort of comes
Uh,
back to you that
yeah, totally. If you're like feeling like you're like, why am I losing my ish right now? Like, what is
mm,
going on? And you're like, oh, luteal phase. Got it. Mental note. Like, well, it just gives you so much more permission to take a break and like give
yeah,
yourself so much more grace. And then also when you know it and you start leaning into it, they could get less drastic. Gets less extreme because you're starting to
yeah.
like pay attention to it. Yeah.
And yeah, as you say, like you are not forcing or pushing against it as much, and so it becomes
Yes.
that little bit easier because you're working on the right things at the right time in your business, so it doesn't feel as hard, I guess,
Exactly.
as well. It's almost like because I talk to clients about they've got to allow a certain amount of time in their week or their day to do different things in their business, whether it's working on the business or they're making their products or working on their content. But it's almost from what you saying here as well that you sort of it almost should be about a month cycle, and that you should
Hmm. Hmm.
be batching your different activities in the month as opposed to the as opposed to just doing it throughout one week.
Yes, 100%. So there's things that in our business that we probably do have to do on a more consistent basis. There are things that, we couldn't just talk to our clients and then ghost them for a month and then
Yeah,
come back a
no
month
customer
later and be
service for a
like,
month. Yeah,
hey, yeah. So there are pieces of our business that are going to need us to be there and to be a part of it, but how intensely that we do that or where we go all in certain areas, right? So for instance, like with me, I do a lot of social media stuff and like interacting with people on social media. And I will go in and kind of like batch clean up, make sure like, did I message everybody? Did I get back to everybody? Did I connect with everybody? Like, did I follow through on all those connections and conversations that I was having? But I'll usually do that like on a monthly basis. I won't do that all the time, every single day, right? Like I'm in my messages and I'm talking, day to day to day, but making sure that I've like really tied up my loose ends, I do that once a month. I
what
just
stage?
hired a
Sorry,
new person to help. Yeah.
what stage is that at more?
That one, oftentimes I like to do that kind of like in the in between. So like off the high of that estrogen of your connect phase, but kind of going into the progesterone phase, the luteal phase, because you're going to have a little bit of that, like, I just want to be behind the computer and batching out a bunch of messages, but you still have that connection. Like you still want to relate to people. So it's kind of like an in-between spot. The same with like, I just hired a new YouTube person. I was like, I want to record some YouTube content and I want to have somebody edit the videos and put it out there. So I gave her a couple of videos and then she wrapped them all up and finished them all. And she's like, okay, they're all done. And I was like, okay, I'll see you in a month. Like, I'll get you new videos in a month. Like, I'm not recording for a month, And so just looking at like those things, like how you can batch, what can you batch and what can you compartmentalize together where you're best suited and what things aren't going to work, right? Like, I know as a mom, as a parent, like, I can't tell my kids I'm not making them food for a week. Like, we have to feed them, So, like, there's parts of our life that are not going to always match up. And it's less about how do I match everything up with my cycle and more about, like, how can I shift the small things and what can I shift, those micro shifts that are going to have a massive impact.
Yeah.
Exercise is probably a huge one,
Yeah,
when
I
you
have read
change
about
the
that,
way
like
you're
in terms of,
exercising.
yeah, like what type of exercise, whether it's the high intensity, whether it's more like gentle yoga, like doing the different things at different
Yes.
stages.
Yes. And that makes a huge difference, right? Because if your body's already feeling depleted and exhausted and low on energy, and then you force it to do this really heavy workout, all you're doing is just continuing to deplete those stores
Mm.
versus we're in this like high impact, like high energy phase. Like, let's go all in on our workouts. Let's go hard. Let's crush it. And then those ones when we need to pull back a little bit. Yeah. Like Go for a walk, like go do some yoga, do some Pilates, like do some other things that are less intense, but still moving your body, still getting those strength benefits and things like that. So that will have massive impacts on just how you feel throughout the day and how you show up every single day, for sure.
Absolutely. And so what are
Yeah.
some common mistakes that people make, or, you know, what are some misconceptions people have about it?
And okay, I think the biggest mistake that I would see is that women will go to Pinterest or they'll go to Google and they'll download like a cycle syncing graphic and they'll just try to match that up and say like, this is where I'm at, this is where I need to be. Same kind of idea as like downloading one of the apps that tells you like, hey, you're on day 8, this is what you should be feeling. The
Mhm.
reason I think this is because one of the most powerful things about learning about your cycle is that it's helping you tune back into your body, right? Like cycle syncing has less to do with like, how do I just use another masculine strategy and put it on my schedule? But it's like, how can we tap back into that feminine? And the feminine is so much about listening and so much about feeling and so much about intuition.
Mm.
And the way that we get there is by really tuning in and listening to your body. Because I can guarantee you, if you and I sat down, like our businesses would look different, our lives would look different, our relationships would look different, our bodies would be different, like everything would be different between the two of us. So there's not going to be a one size fits all strategy, even when it comes to cycle syncing, because it really is about tuning in. And that's like the deeper layer of what I help my clients do is like really learn to listen to themselves, learn to listen to their intuition, really learn how to trust themselves and then operate from that place. And I think in a world where most of society is telling you how to eat, how to sleep, how to wake up, how to like all of the things, it's really hard. And so that takes some time to really tune in and listen to that. So I think that's one of the biggest mistakes I see is like women will do it and they'll say like, oh, it didn't work for me, or I didn't like it, or I did it a little bit, but I didn't really, but they're missing out on that deeper piece of really just being able to trust themselves and learn to listen and know what their body needs and know what they need to adjust. A lot of times I see women that get stuck, like when life doesn't go the way we want it to, right? When you say, hey, this is where my cycle's at, and you put it on your calendar and you plan a big product launch or you plan a big promotion or you plan something. And then, oh no, the period shows up right in the middle. And you're like, that's not ideal. That's not what I wanted, and life is going to happen like that. And so how do you adjust and accommodate with that? That's where the power of really learning to listen to your body and knowing what you need comes in. Because if you're just going by like the straight up schedule, when those things come at you, you're not going to have the flexibility or the adaptability to adjust.
Yeah. And as you
Yeah.
say, like everyone is different, and every almost cycle for each person is different.
Yes.
And
Yep.
no one has a, well, not many people have that exact regular cycle of, say 28 days, and it's 7 days in each stage or whatever it might be. So everyone
Yeah.
is different in that as well.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's
And
one of
what
the
about,
beautiful things, right?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And what about as, you're getting people starting to go through perimenopause or menopause, like how does that change things as well?
For sure. So one of these things, like if we start just looking at like the way the world operates, like the world operates so much in cycles, right? We have spring and summer. Well, you're in Australia, right? I don't know if you get seasons. Like I'm in San Diego. We don't really get seasons.
Yeah.
Like I
I'm
talk
in Melbourne.
about
We get them all
seasons.
in one day, so it's all fine. But yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of, we're the same. We don't get many seasons here in San Diego. However, most of the world operates in seasons where we have spring and summer and winter, fall. We have the seasons of the moon and seasons of or like the rhythms of the moon. We have the sun that circulates. Like we have rhythms in our stock market and in our politics and like the economy, right? Like there's so many things. If we looked at the world, like our world thrives on cycles and rhythms. So whether or not you're using a menstrual cycle, chances are you still operate within a cycle. And when we characteristically look at men and women, women best operate in that monthly cycle. And so for a lot of the women that are in that perimenopause or menopausal state, when it's not necessarily the menstruation that we're looking at, we still want to kind of help the body to stay in that cyclical pattern. And so I generally recommend using the moon as that external guide of saying like, okay, here's how I'm going to just kind of still live into that same cycle that I would have had I had a period, but I'm just going to do it with the cycle of the moon and ensure that I'm still living into that rhythm. Now, one of the other things I think is really powerful with this is that our body is so smart, right? Like it tries to adapt to like whatever we're giving it, whatever we're doing with it. Most of the time we're using very masculine strategies. So it's trying to keep up. But if we looked at like, if you are somebody who likes to wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning and now all of a sudden you want to wake up at 5 because you're like, I can get so much more done at 5 o'clock in the morning. And so you start setting your alarm at 5. I just did this recently. I'm like, 5 o'clock. Like the first few weeks, I'm like, I don't want to get up. I'm like hitting snooze,
that would
hitting
be me. I
snooze,
would not
hitting
want to get up.
snooze. Yes. A couple weeks into it, a month into it, a couple months into it, your body resets that circadian rhythm. And so now it's starting to wake up at that 5 o'clock time before my alarm even goes off some mornings, right?
Yeah.
Some mornings it's still a little snooze and let's stay in bed for a little bit. But for the most part, the body is like, okay, we've reset. Now this is our new wake up time. And so it's kind of the same way when we look at our cycles and how we live into it. If you create that pattern for your body will tune into it and it'll be like, oh, breathe. Like this is the way we were designed to operate. So I think it can be really, really powerful to look at even beyond menstruation of like, what are those rhythms and what are those cycles that maybe one already exist within your life? And then two, how could you create those for yourself so that it helps your body stay within that rhythm?
I love that, and it's really about figuring out where you're at in your stage of life, whether it's as you say. Another thing I just thought of as well, because I know a lot of my friends are using different contraception. So what about things like the Mirena or something like that as well? How does that impact the
Yeah,
hormones in your body?
for sure. It kind of depends on which you're using, but most of them, it is going to eliminate that ovulation curve. So that peak when you feel like that your height and you feel amazing and wonderful, it squashes that. So you won't ever get that. So you tend to operate a little bit more like men in the way your hormones are functioning, with them all a little bit flattened when you are on some sort of hormonal birth control.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely changes the pattern and the feeling. I've had women who have still continued to use like the same, like their moon cycle to continue to live into that rhythm. But it does feel different. It's not going to feel the same. And so I do know a lot of actually women who have started kind of getting into the space and getting into the world that have started getting off of the birth control, like pills and the Mirenas and things like that, and started to notice. And when you become really in tune with your body, you know, like how to be protective without actually having to take birth control. But also it just changes the lens on how people are viewing their bodies. But it does make it different. So it's not the same. Like when you're using your cycle,
Yeah.
when you're on a hormonal birth control, it does eliminate that peak for you.
Yeah. And also, I did notice this, and I think you have noticed it because I did see it on your Instagram as well. The conversations about this is like, maybe it's Gen Z. I don't know if it's the younger group coming through. I saw a TikTok of a guy. He was like, someone said that they can't go out because they're in the luteal phase, and there's just someone else did a
Yeah.
whole story on what that meant, and he was totally confused. But I love that the conversation is going there. You have seen that, right? I'm sure that I saw that on yours.
Totally. Yeah, totally. It's a gamut of them, right? Like sometimes it's actually platform specific. So
Yeah.
when my ads when they run to Facebook, I tend to get a lot more spammy, like not spamming, but like
Yeah.
criticism of the
Criticism that
methodology, right? Like
conversation's
if
taking
women,
place. Yeah.
yes. And that like if women wanted to work differently, they should not be advocating for, the same rights and this and that. And
Quality
like
and yeah.
just this like equality conversation. And so it's like it takes definitely a different toll when we start to talk about it there. And Instagram and TikTok, it does tend to fall a lot more in this like curiosity of well, like, oh, this is interesting. And like, I didn't know this. And I have a 13-year-old and I watch the conversations that she has with her friends. It's like completely different than when I was a kid. Like I was not having those conversations with my friends, So I do think that it's coming out, that I think the next generation will change and it'll be a totally different environment for them, which is amazing. I think it's just also important for us to recognize that research just hasn't been done on women. Like, it's not necessary. Like, our generation is really the first generation that is actually having some of this knowledge come to the forefront. It wasn't until the 80s that women were actually recommended to be included in medical studies. The 80s. So
Crazy.
from the 80s forward, I know it's like, I mean, I don't know about in Australia, but that's the United States. Like, it was not or like wasn't really promoting women being included in medical studies. And a lot of the women it was included in those earlier studies, they had to be on birth control in order to participate in the study. So we just talked about that, like, eliminates all of that normal hormonal change that happens inside of our bodies. And so when we look at that, it's like all of the information that we have about like the MRI studies that are showing how the different parts of the brain are active at different times of the cycle, all of the information that we have coming forward, it's really been only done in the last couple of decades. And so I think that knowledge and that increase in research and information will definitely change the next generation coming forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we said, like even just like the information and awareness and conversation around perimenopause and menopause, like that is just, I'm in that stage. So that, so
Yeah.
for me, I know that, you know, huge awareness of it way more.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, we've just, I think, like scratched the surface in terms of
Totally.
women's health research. I think it's going to explode, I think, in the next decade or two, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And as we said, like that new generation coming through too, that conversations are taking place.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, even I have a son who's 16 and, you know, like, and I have a daughter who's 19. So for me, I'm like, I have conversations all the time and talk about it because
Yeah.
I'm like, he needs to be as well aware as anyone else. Like, you can't
Yeah.
just, you know, like not talk about it with your son or something. So I'm like, no, he needs to be aware so that he's going to be a more informed partner or, you know, boyfriend or something, whatever
For
later on, that
sure.
he knows more information about it too and the impact it can have.
For sure. Like, and I think that's part of it is like it just eliminating that stigma from the very get-go so that it's not a big thing. Like, why is it even taboo to talk about? Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
so in promoting my book, right? Like that was what we were talking about. I actually got an advertisement, like solicitation from Amazon. And
Hmm.
so I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to advertise my book on Amazon with Amazon ads. Never done it before. Going to try it out. So I went through and they gave me like $100 credit to test it out. So I like was testing it out, put it all in there, submitted my ad. My ad got rejected, saying that I was talking about embarrassing bodily functions and something else. I can't remember. It was like predominantly they rejected it because I was talking about an embarrassing bodily function. And I'm like, this is the problem. Like this is the problem. Like, it doesn't need to be embarrassing. Like, who's coining it as embarrassing? Like, we don't have to. Like, the meaning that we've placed on that is the meaning that's been placed on it. Let's put a different meaning on it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And so tell me a little bit more about your book. Like what is what's included? Like what's the things you talk about in there?
Yeah. So I go everything that we've talked about today and like so much more in depth, talking about like the hustle culture and like how the hustle culture is really burning women out and how there's a different way of working and how that they can really tune in and listen to their bodies. There's a chapter on each of the different phases. So what I like scratched today in just a couple of seconds, we go deeper into each one, knowing like exactly what you should be doing, how you should be showing up, how to arrange your business based around it. We go into like that flexibility and like, what do you do when things don't go the way you want them to? Like, how do we adapt to that? Like, how do we adjust? All of those types of things to really help you be able to create a business that creates more income and creates more impact, but yet doesn't require you to be working quite as much. Because when you are working in alignment with this, you're going to get things done faster and easier, right? Like those times you sit down to write and you're like in flow and it just goes and you're like, do, do, do. Versus those other times you sit down, it's like, I can't write. I've tried this 5 bajillion times. I've been staring at this blank cursor. Like it's not
It's not
working.
coming to me.
So essentially, it's not coming. We take all of that and we just like flip flop it. So like recording your social media, instead of getting, you know, one done in 7 hours, you're doing like seven in an hour, you know, like
Mm.
we're condensing and consolidating so that you operate at your peak and like your highest all the time and can take those breaks when you need to.
Love that. That's so exciting. And
Yeah.
as I'm going to release a podcast, the book is going to be out. So I'll put the link in the show notes. And I'm super excited for people to be able to, just dive into it more. And as you say, it helps with that. You went through that whole process of time management and efficiency, and this is going to really help with that, because I know that is definitely something a lot of my clients and customers go through, and are trying to manage that overwhelm. So I can't wait for them to dive into
Yeah,
this and see how it can help them.
for sure. Thanks
Yeah.
so much.
Thanks so much. So thank you so much for being here, Renae. I'm so excited to share this with everyone, and I will share everything in the show notes of where they can find you. And so you obviously show up on Instagram and share more in there, and you have a program that people can join and really dive into it in more detail as well.
Yeah, for sure.
So Renae, what are some of the ways that people can work with you?
Totally. So the book is a great place to start, which is just cyclesyncyourbusiness.com. Like that's a great place. I also have 2 other programs that really are geared towards helping women kind of go deeper with this. So Your Cycle Advantage is my program that is geared towards like really looking at your productivity and your time management and how you actually step into this place of learning on your cycle and understanding it and kind of that language of your cycle. And then I have the Flow Collective, which is my mastermind that's really geared towards like, how do we now actually take that and amplify your business and really help you step into that place of like a feminine leader? Because I really 100% believe that women who take this on are change makers. They're leading the path. We're making massive changes in the world. And so embodying that sense of leadership in a uniquely feminine way, I think is incredibly powerful. So that is the 2 options there that I work with clients in my programs, other than the book. I'm like stumbling over my words a little bit there. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Well, that's where people can get started. And I'm
Yeah.
super excited to share that with
Yeah.
everyone. And I'll put all the links in the show notes for people to be able to access those. So
Okay.
thank you
You're
so much,
okay.
Renae. Look forward to sharing this with everyone. Awesome. Thank
That's good.
you.